A student once ran to the Buddha, breathless. "Master, I've finally figured out who my enemy is." The Buddha said nothing. He simply asked, "And what did you see?" Why that question instead of comfort or warning? Because the Buddha already knew, what we call truth is often just the slice of the story we happen to walk into. And the slice we miss, that's where the real Cain lives. Today I want to sit with you inside that gap, between what we see, what we judge, and what we never knew was there. The story doesn't end where you think it does. One evening, somewhere in the quiet corners of ancient India, voices broke through the still air beneath the trees. Not shouting, not exactly, but sharp, unyielding, the kind of voices that refused to give an inch. There was an elephant, a large, gentle elephant, standing calmly in the fading light, and around it stood 6 people, each with one hand resting on the animal's body. Each of them was feeling something. Each of them was certain of what they felt, and not one of them was lying. Yet every word they said clashed completely with the others. A warm breeze moved through the leaves. The elephant stood perfectly still, utterly unbothered by the argument swirling around it. This is the scene the Buddha chose to begin one of his most quietly devastating teachings. One man gripped the trunk and swore it was a serpent. A woman pressed her palm flat against the flank and said no, clearly a wall. A third, kneeling at the foot, wrapped both arms around the leg and laughed at them both. "A tree," he said. "Obviously a tree." And the elephant, slow and unhurried, simply breathed. None of them had moved. That was the strange part. Not one had taken a single step to the left or right. Not one had reached toward the place another was touching. They stood rooted in their certainty, the way a man stands in a doorway, blocking the light without meaning to. The woman who had called it a wall never looked up, not once, and so she never saw the great dark eye watching her from just above, patient and ancient and full of something that might have been sorrow. A man came to the Buddha one afternoon. His face carried the particular kind of tiredness that comes not from too much work, but from too much thinking. "I don't understand something," he said. "There are so many philosophers in this world. One says the soul is eternal. Another says there is no soul at all. One says the universe is finite. Another says it has no end. How can the same question have so many different answers? Who is right? Who am I supposed to believe?" The Buddha was quiet for a moment. Then gently he began. "Imagine a king," he said, "who once gathered 6 people who had been blind from birth. He brought out a single elephant and said to them, 'Touch it. Then tell me, what is an elephant?' The man listened. The first person reached out and found the trunk, long, thick, curling. 'An elephant,' he said, 'is like a snake.' The second touched the ear, wide and thin, fanning slowly in the air. 'An elephant is like a fan.' The third wrapped his arms around a leg, solid, round, immovable. 'An elephant is like a tree trunk.' The fourth pressed his palms against the belly, vast, warm, like a wall of living stone. 'An elephant is like a wall.' The fifth found the tail, slender, wiry, with a tuft at the end. 'An elephant is like a rope.' The sixth closed his hand around a tusk, smooth, hard, cool. 'An elephant is like a spear.' The Buddha paused, and then they began to argue. A snake, a fan, a trunk, a wall, a rope, a spear. Each voice grew louder. Each person became more certain they alone were right. The man sat with this for a moment, then quietly, "So who was right?" The Buddha's eyes softened. All of them, and none of them. How? What each person touched was real. It was truly part of the elephant. No one lied. But the moment each person decided that their part was the whole, that is when the argument began. That is when suffering entered. The man was silent. "The philosophers you spoke of," the Buddha continued, "are doing the same thing. Each may have touched something real, but the moment any one of them believes his touch contains everything, he has stopped seeing." "Then, what is the truth?" the man asked. There was something close to fear in his voice. "The elephant," the Buddha said simply, "is just there. It stands quietly regardless of what anyone calls it. The question lives not in the elephant, but in the one who is touching it." The man looked up at the sky. The sun was going down, bleeding orange into purple, a color that belonged to neither, and somehow to both. He thought about his father, who had prayed every morning to a God the man had never been able to believe in, and how his father had died peacefully, and how he himself had read every book he could find, and still woken each night with his chest tight. Perhaps his father had been touching a different part. Perhaps so had he. Neither of them had been wrong to reach out. This parable, the blind men and the elephant, is one of the most famous stories in the Buddhist canon. But if we hear it only as a lesson in diversity, everyone has their own perspective and that's okay. We miss what the Buddha was actually pointing at. Something sharper. Something closer to home. Let's start with how suffering works. Why did the 6 men begin to argue? Was it because they touched different parts of the elephant? No. Touching different things wasn't the problem. The suffering began when each person became convinced, what I am touching is all there is to know. In other words, the moment they formed a fixed picture in their minds and declared, this is what an elephant is, this is what it must be. That is the structure of suffering. Reality itself is rarely what causes our pain. What causes pain is the gap between reality and the fixed image we hold of how reality should be. Most of what makes relationships painful, work painful, life painful, isn't the situation itself. It's the friction between what is and what we've decided must be. Now let's go one layer deeper. Each of the 6 men believed, I know the elephant. But what was actually true was, I know the elephant's trunk. I know the elephant's ear. This is a trap we fall into every single day. The moment we feel we know something, we stop looking. The moment understanding arrives, exploration ends. And we begin to treat the piece we've touched as though it were the whole. This is just as true of the people around us. The moment you decide that's just who they are, a partner, a parent, an old friend, you begin to stop seeing them. The image you've built starts filtering everything they say and do. You see not the person, but your picture of the person. And we do this to ourselves too. I'm not good at this. I'll never be someone who, that's just my personality. These fixed self-images feel like honesty. But they may only be one angle, one part of the elephant touched once long ago. This is precisely what Buddhism means by the teaching of non-self. Not that you don't exist, but that the fixed, solid, unchanging self you imagine is not the whole story. What we call I is more like a living thing, always in motion, shaped by conditions, touching new parts of the elephant every day. Letting go of the fixed self isn't a frightening disappearance. It might be the beginning of seeing something much larger. A farmer who has tended the same field for 30 years may walk past a stone he has never truly seen, because he already knows what stones look like. A child visiting for the first time crouches down, turns it over, finds a beetle living underneath. The farmer had more knowledge, but the child had more sight. This is what the teachers mean when they say beginner's mind is not ignorance. It is a kind of freedom. There is no room for anything new to enter. But the one who approaches with open hands can receive what is actually there, rather than what they have already decided to find. The blind men and the elephant isn't just an ancient story. It lives in your day, right now. Imagine this first scene. You and a colleague see a project completely differently. You've talked it through more than once, you're still nowhere near each other, and somewhere inside, you're thinking, how can this be so obvious to me and so invisible to them? They are probably thinking the exact same thing about you. Both of you are touching the elephant. You are touching different parts. Neither of you is making it up. Neither of you is wrong about what you feel. You're just standing in different places. What if instead of asking, why don't they get it, you asked, which part of the elephant are they holding? That small shift doesn't mean abandoning your position. What you're sensing is real, but it might not be the whole picture. Holding that possibility, just a sliver of it, is often enough to let something move. Now, a second scene, the people closest to you. The longer we live with someone, the more solid our image of them becomes. Parents carry a fixed image of their children, children carry one of their parents, couples carry one of each other. These images aren't lies, they're built from real experience, but when the image becomes the whole person, we stop noticing change, we stop seeing what's new. Of course they'd say that, of course that's how it went. But are we seeing them, or are we confirming what we've already decided? The people we are closest to are often the ones we see least clearly. Not because we care too little, but because we're so certain we already know. And then there's the hardest scene of all, yourself, I'm not cut out for this. I always end up here. That's just how I am. Those words feel honest, they feel earned, but they too are the touch of one hand on one part of something much larger. Some old wound, some past failure formed a shape, and that shape became your name for yourself. From a Buddhist view, what we call I is not a fixed object. It is something that emerges fresh, moment by moment, from everything that's happened and everything around us. The elephant is alive. It moves, and so do you. A monk once asked his teacher, "How do I know when I finally understood myself?" The teacher poured tea into the monk's cup until it overflowed, and said nothing. The cup that is already full has no room to receive what this moment is actually offering. Your story from 10 years ago doesn't have to be the lease you live under today. The child who was told they were too sensitive, too slow, too much, they drew a map from that moment, but the territory has shifted even if the map hasn't. You might hear this teaching today and feel something open. And then tomorrow morning you'll be right back to judging from one angle, the same as always. That's not failure. That's human. Even the Buddha's closest students did this. Insight doesn't take root in a single moment. It comes back, again and again, a little more familiar each time. There is a practice, just one, that can start that process today. Once a day, ask yourself this question. Which part of the elephant am I touching right now? When someone sees things differently than you do, pause. When you can't understand why someone acted the way they did, pause. When you catch yourself saying, "I could never," about yourself, pause and ask, which part of the elephant am I holding? This isn't about doubting yourself. What you're sensing is real, but it may not be all there is. The Buddha called this right seeing, looking at things as they actually are, without the filter of what we've decided they must be. Not a single moment of perfect clarity, but a daily returning, a practice of noticing the edges of your own knowing. Tonight before you sleep, bring to mind one moment from today, a misunderstanding, something that frustrated you, a moment that stung, and ask, quietly, which part of the elephant was I touching, and what part might the other person have been holding? You don't need an answer. The question itself is enough. A question like that creates a small opening in the mind, and openings are where things change. Nothing may shift, or everything might, slowly. But one thing is certain, where there is no opening, nothing new can enter. A monk once spent 3 years certain he had understood impermanence, until his teacher's death undid him completely, and he had to begin again, humbled, from the ground up. That undoing was not the end of his practice, it was the real beginning. He wept for a week, they say, and could not sit in meditation without his chest seizing. But then one morning he carried his teacher's bowl to the river, washed it slowly and set it in the sun to dry. And something in that ordinary act returned him to the path, quieter and wider than before. Something to sit with. What is the thing you feel most certain about right now? Someone in your life, that's just who they are. Yourself, that's just who I am. The world, that's just how things work. Which part of the elephant did you touch when that certainty formed? You don't need to answer quickly. Just let the question rest somewhere inside you for a while. A farmer who has tended the same field for 30 years still kneels down each spring, presses his palm to the soil, and waits, because the earth has surprised him before. That patience, that willingness to be surprised, is not weakness. It is how he has kept his hands in something real. The monk Huangbo once struck a student not out of cruelty, but because the student had already decided what the answer would be before the question had finished forming. His certainty had become a wall, and Huangbo simply knocked on it. Sometimes the most honest thing we can do is notice that we are standing very close to a wall we built ourselves. And sometimes just noticing is enough. We don't have to tear it down all at once. A single crack of light through old plaster can do more than a sledgehammer. Stand there long enough, and you may find the wall was never load-bearing to begin with. Today's parable reaches even deeper, when paired with something we explored in an earlier teaching, the ancient image of a finger pointing at the moon, and why we so often mistake the pointer for the truth itself. One thing worth carrying with you. All 6 of the blind men were honest. Every single one of them described, with complete sincerity, exactly what they felt. And still, the argument broke out. Honesty alone doesn't show us the whole. That's no one's fault. We are all in some sense people who have only ever touched part of the elephant. From birth until now, through everything we've lived, we can only approach the world from our particular angle, our particular history, our particular wounds, our particular light. I don't think the Buddha was trying to say you are wrong. I think he was saying what you touched is real. The elephant is just larger than you know. The pain you're carrying right now is real. The anger, the grief, the exhaustion, all of it is a real sensation. It is not nothing, but whether that sensation is the whole story, that we may not yet know. The elephant stands quietly. It doesn't argue about what it's called. It doesn't need you to get it right. And today you touched something that only you could touch from where you stood. That too is real. Thank you for being here today. I'm glad you stayed until the end. Maybe the most we can offer one another is this, not the full shape of the elephant, but the honest account of what our own hands found. A woman once told me she spent years certain her sister didn't love her, and her sister spent those same years certain of the same thing. Both were telling the truth. Neither had lied. They had simply been standing on opposite sides of something enormous, in the dark. Go gently with what you know, and go gently with those who know something different. That is not weakness. That is how we finally begin to find each other. Whose face came to mind while you were listening today? One story a day. In a week your words will change. In a month your eyes will change. In a year the same world will look completely different.